Good morning. Good morning. This is Valerie Leonard. I am the founder of Nonprofit Utopia. I want to say thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us in our first live stream of the year 2024. We are going to talk today about how you can develop an effective case for support. I like to call this the most important document that has almost never been written, at least not by your smaller nonprofits, given the strain and resources and the need to get money immediately, too often, this is a step that people don't go through, right? They just immediately start going after proposals without really taking the time to flesh out their thoughts. Okay, so in just a moment, I will be sharing my screen and then we will get started. All right, so as I indicated today, we're going to be talking about how to develop an effective case for support. And before we get started, too, if you could just post your name in the chat wherever you're listening from. Let us know where you're from, what your experience has been with developing an effective case for support. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to post, and I will share those as we answer questions. And the questions won't be answered publicly until after the presentation. Again, thank you so much for joining us. So we got a lot to cover. We're going to talk about how you can write a compelling case for support. And we hope by the end of this presentation, you will have a much better understanding for what a case for support is and how to integrate it with your day-to-day management activities such as fundraising, marketing, and evaluation. And we will also touch lightly on how to develop a fundraising plan. If you are a member of the Nonprofit Utopia community, we will have by the end of the day, we will have a workbook for you in the community, and that workbook will help you to flesh through some of your ideas. And on Wednesday, we will have a members only session where we can talk about your case for support. So, as I indicated before, I refer to the case for support as the most important document never written because sometimes we're so busy we don't take the time to be laser focused and think about why we're really doing this work, right? So, in many instances, we go from one funder to the next and we're just responding to this application or what that funder wants. And before we know it, if we're not careful, we can end up responding to everyone else's needs and forget so much about why we started this work. And we really want to be more proactive than reactive. And we're going to share a more systematic approach. So, a case for support, I really like the Benefactors group, it's a consulting group. They look at developing a case for support as a prospectus. And if you've ever invested in stock, if you've ever invested in a mutual fund, the first thing they do is give you a prospectus to let you know who the company is about, and what you can expect in terms of performance. And a case for support is very similar to that, right? You want to develop that ideally for your organization and create sub cases for support for every program, every project, especially if it's a capital project. And you want to do this before you start fundraising. And I understand you might have to do both at the same time, given cash flow needs. Um, Again, it's really important to have this singular document. This way you can refer to it early and often and stay on message, stay on mission. So when we think about the case for support, we want to first think about what it is that we do and why we do it, but then we also want to think about who the target is for the case for support. And the target could be several people. The primary audiences are going to be people that give you money, such as foundations, individual donors, and members. But your case for support could also be other stakeholders, because it would be really, really interesting and helpful, really, for other stakeholders, such as employees, such as potential partners, to really get an understanding for who you are, what work you do, why you do it, and a sense for your capacity to do it, right? So that they can make decisions as to how they want to engage with the organization. So, from a funding perspective, you want to think about who your prospective donor is, right? Who is our prospective leader for this fundraising effort? What is their connection to our organization? And if you don't have a connection, how can you approach them in such a way that they can immediately see the connection? And what are their concerns? What are their aspirations? And really think about this like you're doing your value proposition. You think about who your target is, you think about what their aspirations are, you think about what they go through on day-to-day basis in the lives of doing their work, right? And then you also think about their pain points. And given all of that information, you then come up with a product, right, that will help them meet their goals and aspirations, that will help make their lives easier, right, and help minimize their pain. So we're doing the same thing when we engage with funders, because at the end of the day, you are providing value not only to the community, but you're also creating value for the donors. So we need to expand our audience not only to include the donors, but as I was indicating before, look at all the stakeholders. And those stakeholders could be organization management, as I indicated before, it could be your board, it could be the program managers, it could be volunteers, it could be community members. And let's never ever forget our clients, the people that we depend on so that we can stay in existence. All too often, we get it twisted and think that we are the important people. And yes, we're important to our clients, but at the end of the day, our clients should be the center of our. And as I indicated before, you have all these various stakeholders, but then, with all of those stakeholders are going to be the various uses for the case for support. So your case for support could be used in your marketing materials, right? So your solicitation packages, your brochures, your video and multimedia presentations. If you have a YouTube channel, make sure you have a link to your case for support, a link to your website so people can really, really understand who you are and what you're about. Um, you should also make sure that you have talking points gleaned from your case for support. You also want to use your case for support as you develop grant applications and other collateral materials. And it really should not be limited to fundraise, right? You should be able to use it for management purposes, for marketing purposes, for evaluation purposes. So the end users could include people like your program managers, operation managers, so that they can make sure that they're um, supporting the organization to the best of their ability, and make sure too that the marketing messages and the fundraising messages are consistent with the people on the front lines doing the work, either from a programmatic perspective or from an operational standpoint. Obviously, your financial team needs to understand the case for support, and your evaluators and marketing team. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the mechanics for writing the case for support. And before we get into the nuts and bolts, I always like to lay a nice foundation, right? So we talk about the criteria that you need to have in order to create a successful case for support. And remember, your case for support is also a living, breathing document. It's going to be changed, it's going to be updated, you know, consistently, or yeah, consistently with the changes in your organization, the new developments to programs, et cetera, et cetera. But an effective case for support are going to meet the following criteria. First of all, it's going to position the organization's fundraising opportunities as investments that are consistent with the values and the interests of your donors. So you're not going to walk in there hat in hand like, woe is me, all mealy mouth. Oh, give us some money. We need this money so we can keep our doors open. And that could very well be true. You might be on your very last dime, but don't you go and show up in the donor's office, hat in hand, say, if you don't give us this money, we're going to close our doors. No, you're going to talk about the value that you provide. And I just shared with you that long diatribe about how you go about establishing value to your donor. So your case is going to be based on your strengths. So that's going to be your second criteria, not on what the organization needs, right? It's going to identify the needs of your community, the needs that are consistent with your clients. And the only needs that you need to focus on, except, and this is only one example, except in the case for capacity building for the organization, the only time you talk about your needs is for capacity building. Otherwise, your focus needs to be on your clients, it needs to be on the needs of your community. You need to draw parallels as to how what you're doing is similar and even necessary, right, for that donor to, ease his or her pain points, how you're going to help that donor achieve their goals, and how you're going to help that donor to have an easier life. We think that just because donors have access to millions of dollars, that they don't have problems that they need solving. No, you got to get to the point where you understand problems that they're trying to solve, align yourself with their issues, and position yourself to help them solve those problems. And the third criteria is you need to position the organization in the broad context of community and society, and you set the tone for abundance rather than need. I don't care if you're down to your last dime as an organization, your doors could be on track to close tomorrow. Unless you have a good relationship with that donor, you're not going to talk about that. You're going to talk about the value that you bring to the equation. For example, the organization has abundant help to give the community, but simply needs the funder's assistance in making that help available. Or the donor has many opportunities to share resources, and our organization would benefit from those resources because we're doing good things, similar things that the donor is doing in these unique ways. So at the same time, um, a lot of the services we do may be considered commodity, but you have to also think about the individual spend that you put on creating and providing those services. Your case for support needs to be accurate, and in order to be of ongoing value to the organization, it needs to be refreshed periodically. So, again, this is a living, breathing document. You're going to update it constantly to reflect your current reality. You don't want to be passing out dated information. I know some organizations they're still giving out information that's 5 and 6 years old, and they've done so much more since that last brochure was completed, right? So you want to also strike a balance between the emotional and the rational. Sometimes we get so up in telling these compelling stories, right, that we don't talk about what we're doing in order to make an impact. We're not doing what we need to do in order to give a full grasp of the magnitude of that problem. So we need to make sure that we temper those feel good stories with some evidence based practices as to how we're going to address those issues, and always have the data to be able to support. So, your data plus those feel good stories together are going to make a very, very compelling case, right? So, the case must make an impact, which, if it's done correctly, right, it's going to get to the point you will be able to look and see pictures that make a point, or visual data visualizations that make a point with very, very few words. So who's on your team actually develop the case for support? So remember, you need to have all hands on deck when you're developing a case support, even though you have people who write proposals. In some cases, the people who are writing the proposals are not necessarily the ones doing the work of the program development or even administering the program. The people who are writing the case are not necessarily the people who are responsible for day-to-day operations. So you need to include all the stakeholders for this work. So that's your board members, your clients, your partners, and your foundations if you have a relationship with them and you want to rely on them for feedback, right? Not necessarily to write the doggone thing, but it's important to have their perspectives, because at the end of the day, you are creating value for all of the stakeholders, and you have to have all of those perspectives. And you also need to treat this like a project management process, because guess what? It is. It's not just an exercise in writing, it's not just an exercise in fundraising, but there are a lot of moving parts that you need to keep track of, right? So you need to have one person who, at the end of the day, is responsible for doing the outreach to all of the people who are stakeholders so that they can get those various perspectives. So your again, your board, staff, volunteers, your funders, your partners, clients, all of those people need to have some sort of input into this process. Your staff members, and the person that writes it, obviously you want to have someone who's got great writing skills, but you also want that person to have great project management skills. And if you can't find those skills in one person, make sure you pair up the writer with someone who's going to be a really good taskmaster to make sure that they get the information that is necessary. And you also want this person to be able to cast the vision for the organization. I don't know if you've ever read a proposal that it was very clear that it was written by a proposal writer or someone who's not engaged in the day to day work. So you want to make sure that the person who is writing is actually one who understands the mission and the vision for the work before the organization, so that they can translate that in the best possible way with the most passion possible, right? So basically, you want this person to be able to get the organization. So when it comes to the steps, the first step for developing the case for support is to organize a committee, an advisory committee that is going to be, where the buck stops in terms of guiding this work and in terms of signing off on this work. So um, they're going to be the ones who interface with all of the tasks. I'm sorry, all of the stakeholders, right, and make sure that they provide input. And ideally, the size of this group should be no more than 10 people. You might want to have an odd number in the event that they actually do some voting. So it might be 9 people, it might be 11 people, but they're also going to be able to review the research as it applies to this organization. So any research that this organization has done, any applicable research that is done by people in the field that will support this work as being evidence-based. This could include feasibility studies, demographic studies, market research. It could include evaluations, scholarly journals. Again, it could be reports that your own organization has done. It could be interviews. You want to make sure that you capture the perceptions of the public and the stakeholders of your organization. You want to understand their attitudes and understand the impact of this work in their lives. And even if there are areas that need to be improved, you want to make sure that you capture them well, because in many instances, it's going to take money to address some of those shortcomings, right? So you don't want to leave those out. So often we're so busy bragging to everybody about what we've done, we don't want to talk about those areas that we need to improve so that we can have a greater impact. All right. We also need to understand donors' motivations and their aspirations, their pain points, right? You also want to gather documentation that supports the assertions that you make, right? So any of those bold statements that you make about the work that you're doing and the impact that you have, you better be able to back it up, right? Any assertions that you make about, what's happening in the community and this is why we do it, you better be sure you got some data to back it up. Okay. So you want to also be able to describe and have documentation for your institutional strengths. So that would include things like your Form 990, your annual reports, grant applications, promotional materials, mission statements, vision statements, statements of core values. You want to be able to justify your fundraising goals. So you might, if you're doing a capital project, you might include things like architectural plans. Your capital project might include a big expansion of your technical equipment that you're going to need. You're going to have your IT plans ready, your budgets, your strategic planning documents. You want to be able to share whatever those issues are for your community, and especially those that are addressed by the organization. So you're going to show your needs assessment and be able to document how you're responding to those needs, such as economic development, right? You might have reports from the Chamber of Commerce and show how you're in tandem with the economic development plans of that Chamber of Commerce. Talk about your professional development, your religious denominations, etc. So you all, whatever walk of life within you walk, you want to be able to show that you have a command for the issues, that you're addressing those issues, and be able to document not with just data, but also some wonderful stories. So, in order to strengthen the relationship with your stakeholders, you want to be able to interview them and gather testimonials, anecdotes, pictures. You want to also get a sense for, what people are like in their natural habitat. So they'll be a little bit more forthcoming. Show the public how the work that you have done has made a difference in their lives. And after you get all of that information, then you want to write a draft of the case for support, share it with the advisory committee, because remember, the buck stops with them. You let them review it and then do the tweaks that they need, and then you report it out. If you need to do another draft, then you rinse and repeat until you get a final document. All right. So once you have that final document and it's just a matter of a rubber stamp, then you bring it to the board. And when I say a matter of a rubber stamp, that doesn't mean that the board has not been engaged in this process. You want to make sure that your board meeting is not spent um, editing the document and dickering over the document. You want to have board members' engagement, so all of that stuff has been taken care of, so that by the time it's on the agenda for the board for approval, it is, it's a slam dunk. All right, so let's talk about the elements. What is it that you need to include in your case for support? One element is the history of the organization. So you want to talk about how and why your organization has come into existence. And obviously, you're going to talk about your mission. What issues caused your organizations to start in the first place? Why did you think it was necessary to actually start an organization versus just doing a one-off project, right? So you want to kind of create a story again, talking about the social and economic backdrop of the community, right? And when we talk about social and economic, that'll be obviously be things like demographics, some of the issues that they have from a social perspective, as well as financial perspective. You want to be able to describe in dramatic but yet realistic terms your incomparable mission, and you want to be able to put all of that in sound bites. I will say that's where I struggle. I have to write over and over to make sure that I get into sound bites. I eventually do, but it takes me a long time. All right. And remember, you're making the case for your future and your dreams, not just the distinguished past. So, in other words, you don't want to rest on your laurels, but you also want to be able to demonstrate a track record. But given your history, given your track record, what are the implications for the future? All right, so you want to also describe a problem and an opportunity. So you want to describe the social problem that created the need for your organization, your project, or your program. And you want to describe it in terms of an opportunity, as well as look at some of the challenges. And this might be a good use for your SWOT analysis. Remember the SWOT analysis where you're looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the organization, and you're doing it within the context of what's happening in your community. So you want to look at the strengths and weaknesses of the organization within the context of the threats within the community that you have no control over, and the opportunities present in the opportunity, in the community, again, which you have no control over, but they will, these things that are happening, good and bad, will impact your ability to do your work, right? So let's not forget about the importance of doing a SWOT analysis, although that may or may not be included. It all depends on the approach that you want to take. You want to also talk about the urgency, because when you're going before funders, one, it probably is very urgent in terms of the needs for the people that you're serving, in terms of the needs for the organization, but you also don't want to give people an opportunity to sit on your idea for months and months and months without action. So you want to communicate urgency and make sure that you follow up. And you one of the best ways to communicate urgency is talk about the impact, talk about the change that you were able to make into people's lives. In some cases, you have actually saved lives, right? In other cases, you have positioned people for a much better quality of life and a much better future than their present, right? And again, you don't want to talk about how this money is going to help your organization, but you want to talk about how it's going to impact your clients and your community. The only exception is when this case for support is about capacity building, and then it could be about your organization all day long. However, even when you are talking about internal capacity, you need to frame your need to develop internal capacity in such a way that you are still um, using your capacity to serve more people, right? So, given some of the needs in the community, and again, in the case of capacity building for your organization and your needs, what do you plan to do? So, you need to be able to communicate that in your case for support. And then talk about the why. Why is your organization creating more funding for this particular service, right? And then again, this is the part, again, you got to be very delicate here. You don't want to bash your competition, but let's be clear. You're in nonprofit, this is a very competitive environment, and you need to be able to talk about what makes your organization uniquely qualified to solve the problem. Again, this goes to your value proposition, understanding what what the funder is going through on a day-to-day basis, what they're trying to achieve, what their pain points are, right? And then creating a solution, right? A win-win solution. And it's actually a triple win because it's a win for your clients and communities, it's a win for your donors, and it's a win for the organization. So think about that as you think about what makes your organization uniquely qualified to solve the problem. So you want to think about, the proposed service or the ongoing service and programs. Think about your track record. Think about your relationship with the funder or similar funders. Think about your impact, the skills, the leadership, resources, and your capacity. And obviously, you're going to talk about your goals and objectives, right? So you describe the programs. What is it that you're trying to achieve, from a very broad perspective? Give a justification as to why those goals are what they are. Give a justification as to why you are serving that particular need. How much money do you need to raise? And here is the fundraising equation. And this is put together by Panas, Linzy, and Partners Incorporated. So the fundraising equation is having enough money to fund your programs plus a responsible balance of risk and reward equals a healthy fundraising program, right? So in the financing of the proposed plan, who should be responsible? What are the sources of funding that will combine to help you achieve your goal? What part does private philanthropy play in that equation? And remember, this is also a business proposition. So just like businesses have associated business risk, the funder is going to be looking at you and looking at ways that they can mitigate their risks. All right, so you want to make sure that the section that speaks to the funding equation is realistic and lie it ties into the organization's budgets. And you also want to, if there are inherent risks in doing this program, you want to be able to talk about what those risks are and talk about how you're going to mitigate that risk. Because at the end of the day, the funder may necessarily make money off of you, but they're investing in you just the same. And their return on investment, unless they're giving you a loan, their return is going to be social, right? They're going to, they're investing in your cause to make an impact to the clients and community. All right, so the next part we need to look at is the fundraising plan, right? So, how do you propose to raise the required funds? And can you give us any evidence from your past that you're going to be successful in this current drive, right? Where's the funding going to come from? How is it going to be used? Time frame? Who else have you talked to? How can the funders help you, right? The case for support should be able to point them to how they can give you the money, right? What kind of support you need? Is it in kind? Is it cash? Is it a program related investment, a low interest loan? Is it a donation? Is it a grant? And some of the greatest value they can give you is an introduction to people in their network, right? They may not give you one penny, but if they can give you some insights as to how you can strengthen that case for support and introduce you to people in their network, that's golden, right? And at the end of the day, people are giving not to your organization, not to your cause, but they're giving to leadership, right? Not because they like you. I will know 50 million times by people who like me and even love me, right? Um, but in some cases, or many cases where they said no, I wasn't able to seal the deal, right? So, how do you seal the deal? You need to be able, at the end of the day, to give the funder confidence that their money, one, is going where you said it was going to go. I've never had that problem before, right? But still, they want to invest in strong leadership. They're wanting to invest in people who can leverage their investments so that when they walk away, they are comfortable in knowing that the organization is going to continue. They want to make sure that when they're giving money, that they're giving to people and organizations that have the skills, that have the knowledge, that have the capacity to have an impact on their clients and community. And you can also include things like plans and project specifics, and these will be included, as an appendix because these plans can be very, very detailed, especially if we're talking about, capital expansion or, construction plans. So in addition to, your main, I guess the main section, you'll include, architectural drawings. You might include a strategic plan, a technology plan, so that they have a really good feel for where this money is going. You might want to include fundraising details, right? So the goals for each segment of your campaign. So for your capital segment, what are the goals and objectives for your programs, for your endowment, and any program, your social media campaigns, every segment of your fundraising campaign, you need to be able to flesh out the details. Now, every funder may not want to see all of the details, but you still need to flesh all of this out for your own benefit. And speaking of benefits, spell out the benefits and the recognition. So again, funders don't get paid by the organizations, right? However, they do like to get recognition. At the end of the day, they're people just like we are. Everybody needs recognition. Here is a sample outline, and if you are a member of the Utopia community, we will share a template that you can use. And your outline should include things like your history of the organization, your community needs assessment, your goals and objectives, your visions, your programs and services, and your impact, as well as your fundraising goals. You want to be able to tell people how they can give and what's in it for them. So if you notice too, the way this is arranged, we start out with the most general, and then we bring it down to the most specific, and then we make our case and we close the deal. So where do you find information that will help you write this case for support? You can find it in your annual reports, your program logic models, your needs assessments, your collateral materials. And when I say collateral materials, that's things like your website, your tours, anything you use for marketing that will describe your programs, the who, the what, the why, and where you do your work, who's impacted, program evaluations, monitoring reports, your board and contact lists, and your bios, resumes, budgets, mission statements, vision statements, statements of core values, fundraising plans, strategic plans, capital plans and budgets, architectural drawings. If you have an IT plan, your IT plan, if that's what you're raising your funds for. And you can also download a free copy of our booklet, Resource Mapping on Steroids. That'll help you flesh out some of the resources that you have, the needs that you have, and then you can use this also to develop your case for support. Okay, so here's some tips for writing your fundraising plan. Again, you want to review your core organizational documents, things like your mission, vision, core values, your strategic plans, your programs and services, organization budgets, program budgets, as well as the cash flow statement and financial statements. You want to be able to project those needs as they occur. You want to engage your key stakeholders like your board members, executive director, staff, program staff, chief operating officer, your chief financial officer, fundraising and development staff, so that you're all on the same page, telling the same story, although it's going to be from different perspectives. You also want to understand your organization's cash flow. So that is work with folks who are developing the organization and program budgets as you develop the budgets for the programs and services for which you're writing proposals, right? So you want to be very familiar with the resources that the organization has. So step number two, look at how much money is necessary to run the programs and services, where the gaps are. Um, and then you move accordingly. So you determine how much money you have on hand, how much you expect to receive, from whom, where, and when. That's step number three. Step number four, identify any shortfalls and when they may occur, even if you find yourself in the deficit position as you write this document. Identify ways to cover the shortfalls and then develop monthly cash flow projections. And this becomes the basis for your fundraising plan and the financials in your case for support. All right, so you ask yourself, what are the goals based on what we know about the financials? So, how much money do we need? That becomes our fundraising goal. And sometimes you might break up the goal in several pieces, based on program, whether or not it's for programs, whether it's for operations, etc. How much money is needed for each program? And you can also do this based on function. Is it program? Is it fundraising? Is it administration? And some of the strategies and tactics, right? And individual giving. So you'll be asking major donors to make gifts to nations, so, and when we say major donors, we're talking about people who are willing to give $500 and up. Major donor groups, that could be individuals, that could be board giving, finance or development committees, etc. It could be an auxiliary group. Look at your events. They could be small events, online events, in-person events. It could be direct mail. It could be marketing. It could be online and e-giving. It could be through grants, corporate giving programs, United Way fundraising, minor donor groups, participatory fundraising, things like walkathons, chili cook-offs, annual giving and annual year-end campaigns. You name it, if there's a way to raise money, it should be on that list. After that, you need to give a timeline. So what's your overall target? What strategies are you going to use to raise the funds, right? What are your goals and targets for the individual strategies? What activities are you going to engage in to raise the money? Who's going to be responsible? What's the deadline for each strategy and activity? And here's a worksheet that we use to help you really flesh that out. So you'll look at things like the fundraising strategy and source. What's the goal for that source? What are the action steps? Who's responsible for doing that work? What's the funding target and what's the deadline? And here is a template for your calendar. So you list out what the strategies are, and then for every date, you might want to indicate, and for every month, for every month, how much money you plan to bring in and what that activity is. All right, so if there are any questions, feel free to post. I will check and see if there are any questions. All right, we have people who have introduced themselves. We've got Denise Murray. Thank you, Denise, for checking in. She is a social sector leadership consultant. Denise, if you're still there, feel free to post any of your reflections on fundraising, and some of the experiences you've had with some of your clients, some of the advice you might share. Um, then we have D Hunter was sharing, was observing, and thank you so much for sharing your feedback. This was amazing. Thank you. It's amazing to hear from you. This kind of feedback makes my day. All right. So before we go, are there any more comments? Any more questions? All right. James Ralston Davis. James is one of our members. Great presentation. Lots to digest. Thank you, and thank you so much for that, James. Yeah, there's always a lot to digest. I hope that you can make it on Wednesday. We're going to be having a members only session where we help you to flesh out these ideas. All right. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions. Again, I want to say thank you, guys and gals, for making yourselves known. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your feedback and all of that good stuff. Make sure you join us on Wednesday. I'm sorry, not on, well, on Wednesday, if you're a member. Wednesday, we're doing a members only session where we are helping our members to flesh out their cases for support. And make sure you join us also next Monday. We will be here to talk about how you can create value and demonstrate value as a nonprofit to your organizations. And Denise is saying, will do. Thank you, Denise. We're looking forward to ongoing discussions and reviewing your work. Again, next week we're going to be talking about creating value. So often we think about nonprofit organizations as absorbing value from others, but we're going to show you how you can demonstrate true value from an investor's perspective. All right. So until next week, you have a great day, stay safe, and you take care. Bye bye.